As a warning, this video contains spoilers for Rick and Morty through Season 3, Episode 6. The world of Rick and Morty is awesome and the stories are cool, but it's the continuity that really blows my mind. Let's look at 10 instances of Rick and Morty's crazy continuity. Number 1. Morty is very familiar with Rick's neutrino bombs. Rick and Morty often gives us the impression the titular pair have several adventures between episodes, and these off-screen missions evidently aren't always pleasant. Because the show is packed with detail, we often get verbal or visual callbacks that add credibility to the idea that the characters live in a persistent universe that lives on even when we aren't looking. In a series that often veers into the absurd and fantastical, this attention to continuity helps ground the world of the show and make it seem like a real place. Let me show you what I mean. In the third season's Vindicators 3, Rick goes on a bender and sets up a series of booby traps for himself and a team of not-Avengers to solve. It's not as hacky as the horror movie Saw, but it's really exactly like Saw. One of said traps is a neutrino bomb set to go off on a timer, which Morty volunteers to disarm. Rick, who doesn't remember setting up any of this, is taken off guard by his grandson's confidence in bomb defusal.
Morty, how many of these?
Too many, Rick! Too many!
This moment could stand on its own. The episode Vindicators 3 is a sequel to an adventure that we never saw in the first place. And as we later learn, Rick and Morty themselves were left out of Vindicators 2. Just as their universe goes on without us watching, it also goes on without the so-called main characters. The episode had already set up the fact that the show's scope exceeds its relatively small episode count, so it makes sense to us that Morty has developed a skill for disarming neutrino bombs, and also resentment for his grandfather. But the bit that makes the scene extra special is the layer of continuity that ties everything together. As it happens, we've already seen Rick haphazardly arm a neutrino bomb in the opening minutes of the very first episode. The pilot's cold open ends after Rick crashes his ship and then passes out, letting Morty freak out for a few seconds over an impending neutrino bomb explosion before transitioning to the opening credits song. We assume that Morty somehow got out of that jam because the remaining 20 minutes of the episode and the rest of the series still occurred, but a few seasons later we see the long-term effects and funny cutaways. A bitter, resentful Morty. Of course, Rick has plenty of his own continuity-tied character traits. Number 2. Rick has a distaste for seatbelts. It's not hard to tell the difference between Rick and Morty's personalities. The story, dialogue, and Justin Roiland's excellent voice acting do a lot of the heavy lifting in the characterization department. But there are plenty of visual cues that separate the dysfunctional duo. You could see it almost every time the two of them get into vehicles. Morty straps into a seatbelt, while Rick remains unrestrained. It's a small detail, but it's one that's so consistent throughout the show's 3 seasons no matter who's in the cockpit and who's driving. This aspect of Rick's character is so uniform across the series that it makes you believe it's written on an internal document for the show somewhere. It's the kind of thing that, once you learn of it, you keep an eye out for every episode. And the show doesn't disappoint. When Rick doesn't wear a seatbelt, it's for a reason. In Season 3's Rest and Ricklaxation, Rick is split between 2 distinct personalities. All of what Rick would have considered to be the toxic aspects of himself are sent to a boogery hell world, where the rottenness congeals into toxic Rick. Meanwhile, Clean Rick and Clean Morty are left behind to have pleasant, if slightly off-center adventures. Since the toxic parts of Rick are no longer present, Clean Rick puts on his seatbelt. This is a Rick that has something to live for, and has left his death wish behind. Rick is only seen wearing a seatbelt in his normal state one time, just after he transforms back from Pickle Rick. This is significant because it takes place not long after Rick has had a breakthrough in family therapy. Up until that moment, he had avoided the scheduled session by turning himself into a pickle. It really helps if you're caught up on this show. After facing his personal demons head-on, Rick becomes resigned to the idea that he should probably look after himself if he's going to look after his family. That being said, I wouldn't rule out future acts of transmogrification when it comes to ditching family outings. Number 3. Rick's Rager leaves a lasting impression on the driveway. This is one of the more well-known and most cited instances of continuity in the fan community, but it's such a great example that it's hard to not include it. Starting at the end of the first season, the Smith house is always seen with a large crack streaking across the front yard and into the driveway. This is the result of the time the house was briefly transported to another planet, or dimension, during a huge party. Though the ground has somewhat settled since, the crack is still visible whenever we see a good shot of the driveway in seasons 2 and 3. Fans have suggested that the presence of the crack in the driveway is insurance that we're not watching an episode in a totally different universe. But that might be hard to prove in a show that has taken great pains to show that there are infinite universes. Number 4, a Meeseeks does what Meeseeks do. This is more of a nice little background gag than a continuity detail, but it's such a nice Easter egg that we're going to cover it anyway. When Rick and Morty visit Billets and Chips, most of our focus is on the traumatic lifetime experience that is the arcade game Roy. But in the background, before and after Morty's journey, you can see a familiar face. Yep, that's Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me, vanishing after a job well done. Presumably, their simple task was to help that palm tree-looking alien do a bit better at that arcade game. An entire second episode devoted to Meeseeks might be a bit too much to stomach, but a nice background reference is enough to know that they're still out there helping people that aren't Jerry. Number 5, Rick definitely contaminated his home with parasites, and there's a smoking gun to prove it. When alien parasites infiltrate the Smith family home, everyone automatically assumes it was Rick who dragged them in after one of his many intergalactic escapades. But to be fair, it was sort of hard to tell up from down when your memory is being manipulated and you're questioning reality itself. The key incriminating evidence, however, comes in the first minute of the episode. When Rick kills the initial parasite, you can briefly see what seem to be little pink eggs on its body. It's very easy to miss, but these eggs were visible seconds earlier, just before the parasite's presence was revealed. Check out Rick here dumping some green rocks into a trash can. Notice that the green rocks seem to share the same pink egg-like nodules that were coming out of the back of the parasite? This is not a coincidence. It's not even the first time that we've seen the pink eggs. That would be 2 episodes earlier when Rick loads the green rocks into the ship. In case you needed this triple confirmed, the connection was outright stated by the show's creator/belcher, Justin Roiland. Kind of a brilliant parasite when you think about it. Not only does it prey on the memories of those around it, but the eggs are hidden in valuable rocks that greedy pricks like Rick can't help but pilfer. And they would have gotten away with it too, if the family didn't have such vivid memories of how they can't stand each other. Number 6, Morty's 10th adventure was long promised. Coming back to Vindicators 3, we didn't cover one of the best part of that episode's continuity. In the opening scene, Morty demands that Rick answer the call for adventure by pulling out a crusty punch card. The ticket's relative age and amount of stamps suggest some kind of untold history the show evokes so well. But like the neutrino bomb, this punch card has origins in an earlier episode. 2 seasons beforehand, Morty won a bet that earned him the right to have that punch card.
Okay, all right, tough guy. But if my adventure's good, I get to be in charge of every 3rd adventure. Every 10th. Deal.
This is a pretty easy one to catch on rewatch, but it's nice to see evidence that Rick isn't going back on his deal. And that he made some neat stamper shape like Morty's face. Number 7, Gravity Falls Easter eggs are so prevalent that the 2 shows might take place in the same multiverse. Winks and nods to famous movies and television shows are part and parcel of Rick and Morty. Sometimes we see overt references, like the Voltron drone robot in Season 3, and other episodes are full-fledged parodies of films like The Purge and Inception and Mad Max. But the way this show handles Gravity Falls Easter eggs is on a different level. There are so many hints and details to the beloved Disney cartoon that it almost constitutes a bona fide crossover. For instance, in the Season 3 premiere, 2 Mortys that look like Gravity Falls siblings, Dipper and Mabel, appear in the background of the Citadel of Ricks. Seconds earlier, we see another Morty that appears to be holding Journal 3, an important artifact of Gravity Falls lore. But the wear and tear on both books is identical. That wasn't the first episode to reference Gravity Falls, however. Back in Season 2, the nefarious Bill Cipher appears for a brief moment on a computer screen. The amount of Gravity Falls Easter eggs might make you reconsider something that, could just be run-of-the-mill graffiti depicting the Illuminati symbol. Then again, since Bill Cipher already showed up with that complete top hat, it's hard to see the symbol as anything other than a reference to Gravity Falls. Less ambiguous is the appearance of 8-Ball, another villain in the Gravity Falls universe. A familiar gooey booger corpse thing can be seen briefly in the Toxic universe, complete with a pool of ball eyes that are its namesake. Sealing the deal is a moment that actually begins in an honest-to-God Gravity Falls episode. Grunkle Stan loses a coffee cup, pen, and notebook when it's sucked into a portal, only for those same items to pop out of another portal in a Rick and Morty episode. Let's take another look at that slower. That's the same question mark mug, alright. The notepad and pen are obscured, but they're still there. Sorta makes you wonder if Rick Sanchez and Grunkle Stan ever run into each other on occasion. Either that or Stan is Rick from another dimension, or you know what, let's just save the fan theories for another time. Number 8, Jerry keeps his treasured possessions in a safe place. The garage is almost exclusively Rick's domain, but for a brief period, Jerry retook it and made it a space of his own. In the Season 3 premiere, we see what a Jerry garage looks like, and it's predictable and boring, just like Jerry. But when Summer starts rummaging through the cupboard looking for Rick's secret stash, we see what appears to be Jerry's most treasured keepsakes. One of them looks like a picture of Doofus Rick from Season 1, the only version of Rick that Jerry has ever gotten along with. Then there's a jar of what might be applesauce, which is probably a reference to the torch Jerry still holds for his marketing slogan that went over so well in the simulation, inside another simulation. And then there's the model of the Titanic, which we know Jerry loves thanks to the subplot in the first season finale. Taken separately, these are all sweet keepsakes for memories that Jerry cherishes. But it's sort of disconcerting at the same time. Yes, they all represent Jerry at his happiest, but each of these memories ends in disaster. Doofus Rick leaves Jerry forever, the Hungry for Apples campaign pitch goes so badly in real life that Jerry gets fired, and the trip on the fake Titanic ends with Jerry being sexually assaulted. If those are the best memories Jerry can come up with, well, that does sound a lot like Jerry. Number 9, Mr. Poopy Butthole predicted the Season 3 premiere almost to the day. The wait between seasons of Rick and Morty is excruciating for fans, but at least Mr. Poopy Butthole was upfront about the gap. At the end of the second season, Mr. P estimated that the next season would debut in about a year and a half.
Tune in to Rick and Morty Season 3 in like a year and a half or longer.
Sure enough, when the surprise premiere of Season 3 hit, it had between it 1 year, 5 months, and 28 days since the last new episode. Only 2 days off. Not bad for a guy who's named after a feculent anus. Number 10, Rick's Microverse returns in a tragic way. Other episodes might have heavier drama, but Season 2's The Ricks Must Be Crazy could be the darkest chapter of the series. The fact that Rick has been using an entire microverse to fuel his ship is bad enough, but he destroys an entire reality when he smashes a miniverse, which itself could be a teenyverse, simply to stick it to his rival. And so it happens, in the following season, Toxic Rick ends up doing the exact same thing in his war with Clean Rick. Look closely and you can see the world toxifier used to gooify the planet is in fact powered by 2 microverses. The casing on the side gives it away. Toxic Rick would totally use a microverse for his dastardly plans, but it's regular Rick who leaves the batteries on the tower. When we see the microverses again, it's in the post-credits stinger. The batteries seem to be completely dead. Plenty of anti-heroes have racked up a few kills, but not many can count their murders in universes.